Everybody? That's good to hear. I'm going to try and keep this short so we can get it to the other kids as well, but right now, I guess I'll just sit down. So I'm just going to tell you all a little bit about myself before I start. I'm just a pretty normal kid. I was born in a Christian family. When I was born, my parents devoted me to Christ, and that was sort of like the normal throughout most of my youngest part of my childhood. I spent most of my school time in a Christian elementary school. So I was pretty young at the time, so I didn't really know much about really Christ and spirituality and being really spiritual and what it meant to have a real relationship with God. So I got baptized when I was really young, not knowing really what it meant. I just kind of wanted to be on the big screen at the church. I'm not even going to lie. But eventually, COVID hit, and I ended up moving schools to a virtual school called UVA. And most of the people there weren't Christian. I started moving farther away from God. I stayed attending a church, but they didn't have much to really offer me, it didn't really speak to me at the time. But eventually, my friend Bryson, which is back there, my friend Bryson invited me to this Wednesday night kind of get out at Fellowship Church. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. My parents are thinking about moving churches over here, so I'll tell them what I think. And I had an awesome night. All of the people there were really cool, and it was pretty awesome. So I just kept going. I kept attending, and I got closer to Christ in a way, but I wasn't really sure what it meant to be a believer yet. And then out of nowhere, conveniently, my friend, again, I hadn't came in a while, so my friend invited me, Bryson again, to the summer camp, to a summer camp that they were hosting for the middle schoolers. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I get to stay away from my sister. So I ended up, love you too. And so I went, and it was pretty cool. For the first couple of days, we didn't do much, really, but it was while we were there, it was a very spiritually awakening time for me. And I started getting closer to Christ, really close to Christ, and I start really believing what I had heard, because there's a difference between knowing God and knowing of God, because I knew, I had a basic idea that God was real, but I didn't have that relationship. And so I got saved that Tuesday with Mr. Pete. Thank you, Mr. Pete. He was teaching about this Christ devotional. He was telling us the difference between knowing God and knowing of God, and how to really get to heaven, what you should be doing as a believer. And at the end, we were about to head back to the dorms we were staying in at the time, and Mr. Pete just called everybody before we all left, and he said, if anybody wants to talk to me afterward and pray with me, then I'll be backstage if anybody wants to talk. So I wasn't really going to go, but out of my curiosity for Christ at the time, I decided to stay and see what he had to say. And that's when he led me through the prayer, and I became overwhelmed I was just touched by Christ. Words cannot describe how I felt, to be honest, but in that moment, I just knew. And I got awakened, and everything was just, all the doubt in my mind was just gone. So after that, I went back to the dorms, and we did the rest of summer camp, which was pretty awesome. But when we came back, I'd been doing some, I hadn't really been living in Christ as much as I should have been. So I started making some changes, and I've been doing stuff like tithe, I've been worshiping more, just attending church more often as well. And I just feel more spiritual as a person. It's funny, when you actually know God, you can't really make up the excuse, well, maybe he's not real, just so you can skip your homework and play video games first. But, I mean, I guess that's kind of all I really got to say, but thank you all for listening, and for this bet, all my guys out there, men.